Well, good morning again. Man, those lights are bright. It is just good to be here. Really am grateful for just the opportunity to gather together with you on a Sunday morning. I just love spending time with y'all. And so I love the story of God. I love the story of Jesus. And so it's always just an honor and a privilege for me to be up here doing this with y'all. Well, we are, week 3 or week 4, I think, of our series, Summer in the Psalms. And so if you're just joining us, several weeks ago, we just started to open up the book of Psalms, which is a pretty large chunk of the Old Testament. And the book of Psalms is a book of all kinds of different things. There are songs, actually, in the book of Psalms. So a lot of the psalmists would write a song, and then 2,000 or thousands of years ago, actually 3,000 years ago, the nation of Israel, they would get together in their church services, and they would sing songs just like we did, and they would use the book of Psalms as their hymn book, so to speak. It's a book of wisdom. There is just all kinds of wise wisdom in the book of Psalms that has its aim to try to teach us how to live a better life. There are laments, people going through suffering, people going through hardship. And so some of the Psalms are written just as laments about the hardships of life. Some of them are prayers, and we've looked at a couple of those. And today we're going to look at a section of a psalm that has a really, really significant prayer in it. And so the book of Psalms is just kind of this collection of varied scriptures that try to teach us about who God is. And if you were here on week 1, one of the things I mentioned is that it's really one of the most theologically rich books in the entire Bible. And theologically rich, it's a fancy way of saying thoughts on God. That's all theology means. It's what we think about God. It's the thoughts on God. And so as we read through the Psalms, one of the things we see is just what people think about God. And this morning, we're going to, if you have a Bible, we're going to go to Psalm chapter 139. And most specifically, we're going to read the thoughts of a guy by the name of David. David is the king of Israel, and he writes this psalm for us, and he unpacks some of the most theologically deep thoughts on God that we actually have in the entire Bible, which is saying a lot. David is going to explain to us what people who are much smarter than me would call the omni-attributes of who God is. He's going to explain to us sort of in poetic form characters of God or characteristics of who God is. And so before we get into the psalm, I want to just kind of explain some of those omni-attributes so that you can perhaps see them as we read the book of Psalms. And so one of the things that David describes in Psalm 139 is what we would call is the omnipotence of who God is. It's just 2 words, omni and potent, and all that means is all-powerful. What David is saying here as he goes through the psalm is that there is nobody more powerful than the God that we're about to discuss in Psalm 139. There is no president, there is no king, there's no ruler, there's no political system, there's no economic system, there's no military might, there is no nuclear fission bomb anywhere that has more power than the one that David is writing about in Psalm 139. And so David talks about the omnipotence of who God is. He talks about the omnipresence of God. So omni meaning all, present meaning present. He introduces us to the idea that God is everywhere all the time, all at once, which is just a mind-blowing concept that I don't think our finite brains cannot fully comprehend. But God is in this room, and he's in the parking lot, and he's in the McDonald's in Greenville, and he's in China, and he's in Australia, and he's in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He's ever present everywhere, which means you cannot escape him, no matter how hard you try. So David talks about the omnipresence of God, and then he talks about the omniscience of God. Easier way to say it is omniscience. All science just means knowledge. He talks about God being all-knowing. He just knows everything there is to know about everything. Everything there is to know about mathematics, about physics, about biology or physiology or cosmology or any other ology that you can come up with, David says God knows all of it. And as we go through the psalm, I think you'll see each one of these attributes, but there's no way that in 30 minutes I can do 3 of those, I can do justice to all of this. There's no way in 30 minutes that I can really talk about the bigness and the powerful and the presence and the knowing of God in just the short time that we have this morning. So what I really want to do is I want to focus on 2 verses in the entire psalm. It's 24 verses. I'm going to read the whole psalm to us this morning because I want just the words of God to just pour over your heart. I want the words of God to just pour over your spirit this morning. I want you to hear what the psalm says. But at the very end of the psalm, after David is done talking about all of this, he prays a prayer that is one of the most challenging prayers in the entire Bible. And this morning, I want to suggest to you that you may need to pray this prayer. And I would also suggest you won't want to. That when you see the prayer and hear the prayer and you understand what David is suggesting for you and I to do, there will just automatically be something inside of you that says, I think I'll take a pass. I'm not interested in that one. I'd rather just keep praying my prayers of God protect me, God bless me, keep my kids safe, which are all fine prayers. But David gets to the end of this psalm and he prays a prayer that cuts right to the soul. And so what I want to do is I want to actually just read all of Psalm 139, again, so that the words can wash over your heart and soul. And when we get to the last 2 verses, I'm going to pause and we're going to spend extra time there. So this is Psalm 139, King David. We don't actually know the context of why he's writing. Several weeks ago, if you were with us, I unpacked Psalm 3, and we have a really clear understanding of why David wrote Psalm 3. He was fleeing for his life. He had been deposed from the throne. His own son wanted him dead. There was enormous family dysfunction, and that's why David wrote Psalm 3. We don't actually know why he wrote Psalm 139. It doesn't change its theological implications. It doesn't change its power or beauty to us. But we just don't have a full understanding of why he wrote it. But here's what he writes in Psalm 139. And if you've been around church for a while, you'll probably recognize some of these verses. Here's how he starts in verse 1. He says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." And that is either a comforting thought or a threatening thought. We're going to come back to that. He says, "You know when I sit and when I rise, you perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it, Lord, completely. You hem me in behind and before. It just means he's on my right side, my left side. He's in the front, he's in the back, he's over top. He is all encompassing of me. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty for me to attain." And that last verse there, verse 6, when it says such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain, it kind of sounds a little flowery, like David is like, this is just the most amazing thing. The simple fact that you know me this well. But actually in the Hebrew, what David is saying is it's a little bit overwhelming that you know me this well. It's too lofty for me to attain. He's saying, I can't even fully comprehend the fact that you know me this well. Like, you know when I sit, when I stand, you know what I'm going to say before it's a thought that reaches my tongue. And there's something about that for David that just feels a little bit disconcerting, which is why in verse 7, here's what he says, "Where can I go from your spirit and where can I flee from your presence?" There's just something inside the human spirit, like if somebody knows me that well, if God knows me the way David is describing, it kind of makes me want to run. It kind of makes me want to flee, because what does he know about me that I don't want him to know? When he searches me, what's he going to find that I'd rather he not find? And there's something inside of us that makes us want to run and hide and attempt to flee from God. And David just says, I can't. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? And then he goes on to tell us why we can't escape him. If I go to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, which in this case, he's talking about the east. And if I settle on the far side of the sea, which is a reference to the west, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you and the night will shine like the day. For darkness is as light to you. You cannot escape God. No matter how hard you might try, no matter how you try to convince yourself that you can, David in the Psalm says it's just not possible. It's not possible to flee from his presence because if I go high, if I go low, if I go east, I go west, the depths of the sea, it doesn't matter because he's omnipresent, he's everywhere all at once. And this is an all-consuming thought for David. In verse 13, he says, you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. He's telling us that God is the creator of our human soul, and he's the creator of our physical bodies. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eye saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I wake, I'm still with you. And then if you jump down to just verse 23, this is where he prays. He sets us up with this poetic language about the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present God. And at the end of his psalm, he dips into one of the most dangerous, courageous prayers I think you can ever pray. And like I said, I just don't think most of us want to pray like this. Here's what he says, verse 23, search me, God, and know my heart. When's the last time you asked anybody to search you? We really don't invite that many people into searching the inner workings of our life. The depths of our soul, the depths of our spirit, the thoughts we think when nobody's around. Like, we're not inviting people into those moments. And David, at the end of this psalm, he stops with a prayer, or he ends with a prayer, and he says, God, the thing that I want you to do above everything else is to search me, and I want you to know my heart. And I think the reason this prayer is so incredibly important is because David understands how important his heart is to his life and how he lives his life. In fact, this whole idea of our heart is all over the scripture. Old Testament, New Testament. In the book of Jeremiah is an Old Testament prophet. Here's what Jeremiah writes. He's sort of reflecting even on himself. He's talking about himself. And he says, the heart is deceitful above all things. Above everything else in my life, I know that my heart is deceitful. It's dishonest. And it's beyond cure. Who in the world can understand it? Jeremiah just understands that there's a brokenness to his heart. There's a fault in his heart. There's a deceit in his heart. And if he doesn't get that healed or cured, that's going to lead the rest of his life. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 speaks to it as well. One of the most famous proverbs in the Bible. Above all else, the writer of Proverbs says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Let those words sink in for just a second. David is praying, search my heart. And I wonder if he has these words in mind. Above all else, guard your heart, because David knows that everything that is in my heart flows out of my life. For everything I do flows from it. Do you understand that the way you love your spouse flows from your heart? The way you sacrifice for each other, the way you submit to each other, the way you respect each other ultimately flows from the condition of your heart. And the writer of Proverbs says, you better guard it. David comes along and says, I need you, God, to examine it. You understand that as a parent, how you parent flows out of your heart. In the Old Testament and in biblical times, the heart was the seat of the emotions, and it was the core of who we are as people. And so in a very real sense, just everything we are as people comes somewhere out of the heart, out of the soul, out of the spirit, if you want to look at it that way. How you parent flows out of your heart. The fear you have as a parent, perhaps the insecurities or the confidence you have as a parent, the wisdom or the decisions you make as a parent somehow are flowing out of the condition of your heart. Do you know that you spend your money out of the overflow of your heart? What you prioritize, what matters most financially, somehow is connected to the condition of your heart. How you treat fellow employees, how you treat your neighbors, how you think about yourself flows from your heart. And David, at the end of this psalm, says, God, you are all-knowing, you're present, and you're all-powerful. I need you, God, to look deep into my heart, and I need you to tell me what you see. Jesus talked about this too. It wasn't just the Old Testament writers. Jesus, in one of his most famous sermons, probably the most famous sermon that he ever gave in Luke chapter 6, the author of Luke records this moment where Jesus is preaching to this huge crowd of people. And here's what Jesus says: a good man or woman brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. And the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Here's the question for this morning. What is your heart full of? If we were to take an x-ray machine and just put it up against your heart and we could see what you have filled your heart with, if we could see what you've let in to fill your heart, what is your heart full of this morning? Is it full of selfishness? It's just about me, my desires, what I want. Is it full of greed? The writers talk about deceit or untruth. Or is your heart full of joy? Is it full of peace? Is it full of contentment? Is it full of forgiveness? This morning, as you walk into this place, we all carry a story with us in here. Every one of us. We all had a week. I had a week. Oh, I had a week. And I walked in here with a heart full of stuff. Some stuff I don't want. Some stuff I don't know yet how to get rid of. What's your heart full of this morning? And I think this is why this prayer that David prays is so incredibly important, because we can fill or allow the world to fill our hearts with all the wrong things. And so David says, search me and know my heart. Then he prays, test me and know my anxious thoughts. I mean, y'all know that your head and your heart are very connected. And often what you think affects and determines what you feel. And one of the biggest battlefields for me is here. It's the thoughts I think. One, it's the thoughts I think about myself. And quite often what happens is I tell myself a lot of lies, or I believe a lot of lies in my head about myself, that I am not a good husband, that I am an ineffective leader, that I will never measure up to the standards that God has for me, which in part is absolutely true, that I've failed somehow as a father. And these thoughts can just roll around in our head, and eventually they get to our heart. And so what David is doing, he's connecting these two pieces of our being together, head and heart, and saying, God, not only do I need you to look deep into my heart, but I need you to go ahead and examine my thoughts too, because there is some stuff up there that just flat out stinks. Paul, in his letter to the church in Rome, so the Apostle Paul was a church planter. He planted a whole bunch of churches, and then he would write letters to these churches. He didn't plant all of them, but in Romans chapter 12, verses 2, he's writing to the church in Rome, and he says to the people, his church, or the church in Rome that he's writing to, don't conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There are patterns of thinking that we can get stuck into that eventually affect our heart if we're not careful. And Paul here says, don't conform to those patterns. Don't conform to the pattern of the world that says only, like, true success is only measured in dollars and stuff. Don't let that pattern that the world lives in conform your mind. Allow the truth of Scripture and God to transform the way you think. The pattern of the world says the only way that you're successful is if you perform, and produce. You are human doing, you are not human being. Paul says, don't let that pattern conform you into believing that the only value you have as a human being is what you produce, not in who you are. This is why this prayer is so incredibly important. It's challenging to pray because ultimately what we're asking for God to do when we say, search me and know my heart, test me and know my anxious thoughts, we're asking for God to expose us. And that's just not something that we do as people. Expose what's in here and expose what's up here. In verse 24, he continues his prayer and he says, God, I want you to see if there's any offensive way in me. Offensive here is just grievous. Is there anything that makes you sad? Is there anything that breaks your heart? Is there anything that causes you pain, God? So he moves from the head, from the heart to the head. Now we're talking about behavior. Is there anything about not just the way I think and not just the way I feel, but the way I act towards the people around me that would hurt you or hurt them? And I love what David is doing here when he says, see, God, you see if there's any offensive way in me. He's not trusting in his own moral compass. He's asking God to be the judge of what's going on in his head, his heart, and his actions. And the reason that's important is because I don't know about you, but this is true for me. I can justify anything. Does anybody relate to that? I can justify having 3 bowls of ice cream just like that. No problem. I don't care what my wife says. I don't care what the doctor says. I don't even care what the contents on the back of the ice cream container say, how much sugar is in it. I don't care. I can justify it like it's nobody's business. I can justify speaking harshly to my wife because she was disrespectful in a moment. And so I feel justified to speak harshly against her supposed disrespect. And maybe she was disrespectful, but the honest truth is I'm not justified in speaking to her that way, but I can justify it if I use my own moral compass. Because I will make excuses for myself all day long. I can justify spending way too much money on a car because it's got all the bells and the whistles, and I need a car that massages my butt as I drive. Right? Just because it costs an extra $10,000 for I need that. Do you know how stressful my job is? Do you know how often I drive home and I've got knots in my back and in my neck? And if I had a car that had a heated seat and a heated steering wheel and it said really nice things to me to boost my self-esteem, I'll pay $10,000 because I need that. If we use our own moral compass, y'all laugh, but it's true. If we use our own moral compass, we'll justify anything. And David comes along and says, I know if I use my own compass, I am going to screw this up. So God, I need you to see if there's anything in me that would break your heart and hurt the people around me. Is there anything in me that would break your heart, God, and hurt the people around me? And the last thing he says, I think is the most important thing. Because if all he did was pray, search me and know my heart, test me and know what's going on in my head, see if there's any broken, offensive, if he just stopped there, that's threatening and depressing. But the last thing David says in Psalm 139, and he says, God, after you have done all of that, after you have searched me, after you have plumbed the depths of my heart, after you have looked into my thoughts, I need you to lead me, God. Because the hardest person in the world to lead is yourself. There is nobody more difficult to lead than you. And David, in just a sense of humility, perhaps because when you read through the story of David and through the life of David, you see moments where he tried to lead himself and it turned into an absolute firestorm. So he reaches this point and he says, God, I need you to lead me. Don't just search. Lead me towards everlasting, and this is everlasting life. And so there is a reference toward God, lead me towards eternity with you, lead me towards heaven with you. But it's not just about leading me towards heaven. It's lead me, God, in my life here and now towards what is true, towards what is right, towards what is good. Search my heart, test my thoughts. God, lead me towards forgiveness for people that I've refused to forgive, because if you don't lead me towards forgiveness, I am going to end up at bitterness. If you don't lead me towards forgiveness, I know what you will find in my heart, and it will be resentment. And I'm not strong enough to do it on my own. There have been too many people over the years that I have withheld forgiveness from because I was using my own moral compass. And all it did was make me a more angry, bitter, and resentful person. God, you have got to search out the unforgiveness in my head and in my heart, and you've got to lead me towards forgiving the people in my life that I'm refusing to forgive. Lead me towards humility, which of course is a prayer, lead me away from the pridefulness in my life. Lead me away from my prideful moments as a husband, as an employer or an employee, as a friend. Lead me away from thinking I have all of the answers and I have it all figured out. Lead me towards a place of humbleness towards you. Lead me towards sacrifice. Lead me towards a life that is sacrificial in nature, not one that just consumes, and it's all about me, but rather a life of sacrificial service to those around me. Perhaps you would pray, God, lead me towards generosity, because right now in my head and in my heart there is a greed that has taken hold. God, would you lead me towards a generous life, not just financially. It's not just about money and who we give money to or how we give money to, but let me be generous with my time. Let me be generous with my friendship. Let me be generous with forgiveness. Lead me towards generosity. Lead me towards healing, God, in my own heart. Sometimes it's not just about other people. Sometimes he needs to lead us towards healing for us, for the brokenness that we have. Lead me away from the shame and the guilt that I experienced because of my past, and lead me towards a place of healing, wholeness. Lead me towards hope. I mean, at times it just feels like we live in a really, really hopeless world. If you turn on the news for 5 minutes, we're basically going to blow ourselves up tomorrow. I mean, sometimes that's just what it feels like. We're afraid to send our kids out Lead me away from fear and lead me towards trust in you. Lead me away from hopelessness and towards hope in you. What is it this morning that if you were to just be honest before God, you would say, I need you to search and I need you to test. But the truth is, you already know what he's going to find. You already know what's in there. You already know what's gotten a hold of your heart. But that you would say, God, lead me away from that. The worship team is going to come out and we're going to end our service different than we traditionally do. Normally, the standard church thing is we sing some songs, I talk, we sing another song. We want to change that this morning. So as the worship team comes out, what they're going to do is Melissa is actually going to sing with the team a song. It's called Psalm 139. She's just going to sing the psalm essentially over us. So I've read it over us, and now they're going to sing it over us. And here's the challenge. If you want to stand, that's up to you, but I would actually invite you to do one of two things, to either stay in your seat or come forward to this is an altar for us. That's a big, huge platform and stage. But when God is ever present, because we believe he's in this room, this becomes an altar where you can have a meeting with God. And because he's ever present, it's not like he's here and he's not in your seat. But rather than stand and sing the song like we normally do, I want to challenge you to just pause and to actually pray this prayer. And maybe you'll come forward and maybe you'll get on your knees or you'll stand at the altar and you will just cry out to God, I need you to search my heart. I need you to test my thoughts, God, and I need you to tell me what's in there that is not bringing me life, that is not bringing me joy, that is holding me back from living the good life that you have promised us, not the perfect life, not the flawless life, but the good life in Jesus Christ. God, I need you to show it. And then the very next thing you need to pray is, God, lead me away from that and lead me towards you. And whatever it is he needs to lead you towards. So the team is going to sing. This is your chance to pray like David prayed. This is your chance to recognize that the all-powerful, all-knowing, all-present God is here in this place, and he's literally ready to meet with you. Will you invite him in? That's what his prayer is. It's an invitation. It's an invitation to the God of the universe to search us, to know us, to test us, and to lead us.